Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Monday at about 9:41. Pretty nice day out today. The weekend was pretty nice. Yesterday was gorgeous. Saturday, not so much, but hey, it is what it is. This week is the start of or actually the first day of school is this week. So the summer is officially coming to an end, unfortunately. But so with schedule things and I'm back into more of a place now to where I can go back to doing um, more videos. It gets a little bit easier now with the change in my schedule. So very excited about that. One of the things I want to try to do, which I haven't done in a while, which is my favorite thing of this about this channel, is around doing interviews. I haven't been able to do any interviews in a while. It takes a little bit of time to kind of coordinate and schedule things, but it's my favorite thing to do. So at some point that will happen. So stay tuned for that. So today's show is on a movie. Again, about 80% of the time, maybe more, a lot of the times now I buy a lot of movies, particularly in the horror exploitation world, that I haven't seen before. I've just gotten, over the years, I've gotten more and more familiar with particular directors, but yeah, and in certain decades that I really love, especially the 70s. So I've gotten pretty familiar with the genre, and so I kind of know more or less what to look for. But I've been taking lots of chances and going for it and buying movies that I've never seen before. And I bought this movie, The House That Screamed, from 1969. It's a Spanish movie. I bought this, was it like last week or the week before, on my last trip up to Bull Moose. And I was just completely blown away by this movie. It came out in 1969. This movie is amazing. And the interesting thing is that this movie is rated like PG, which is essentially it's like a TV movie, which is just mind blowing because of how effective this movie is. And I think about I there's like two camps. I think I'm a firm believer in a lot of times like when something or the idea of less is more, because I think a lot of the times when as a viewer, and I kind of think of it pertaining towards involving music and movies, but I kind of feel like the whole less is more thing is it's really effective because it leaves a lot up to the viewer, to you're not hearing or seeing everything that is being foreshadowed or talked about or brought about. You're A lot of things are left up to your imagination. So, which is really, really effective. Really, really effective. Movies that are essentially are TV movies, or they worked within those perimeters where they were really limited to what they could show. But I feel like they're just incredible movies. Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, amazing, amazing movie. Essentially, it's a TV movie rated PG, one of the creepiest, one of the scariest movies ever made. I think probably aside from like John Carpenter's Halloween, probably like the best movie to watch around Halloween time since the Halloween is approaching. But just incredible atmosphere. My favorite horror exploitation movie of all time, Tourist Trap, starring Chuck Connors. That movie is a masterpiece. One of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen, and just one of the creepiest movies. Super sleazy, so incredibly terrible at times, but just amazing. And essentially, that movie, when it came out, it failed to get an R rating. It got like a PG rating, so it didn't get distributed in theaters like they were trying to do. It got picked up in syndication on cable, and then it made its money through cable. Another example would be Steven Spielberg's first film, Duel, which is a TV movie, was made for TV, and that's rated G, but just again stays with that within the perimeters of less is more, and the level of suspense and the atmosphere for all of these films because of those limitations really is the biggest strength of those movies, and that's how I view The House That Shrieked, because this is essentially a PG rated movie. And it did get a theatrical release, but it was also on television at the time. But again, those limitations I feel like really enhance the experience. I'm on the other side of things. I'm a huge fan of like extreme gore and extreme sleaze and violence and sex and just total debauchery. I I love seeing a great horror movie that will go to those places. A real like a sex exploitation movie with like horror elements or what have you, or extreme gore. Big fan of practical effects. I love those things so much. But to me, even in films of that nature that have you know a real extreme presentation, it has to be about. At the end of the day, it really has to be about establishing the established characters and creating that atmosphere. It comes, in this, if the story's good, that's really what matters. But if the film has this rich atmosphere, that's the core of it. If a film just has violence for the sake of violence, it kind of takes on the cotton candy syndrome, where it tastes good or looks good, but then the next day you just kind of forget about it because there isn't any, substance to it. And an example for me of that would be a movie that came out a few years back, which has been really, really, for some odd reason, really embraced by fans of horror, but Terrorizer or Terrifier. I think that's an example of that. But anyway, this movie I just watched for the first time. This Blu-ray transfer of this film is just absolutely incredible. 1969. It was released worldwide in 71. It was directed by Narciso Ibanez Serenado, who is a Spanish director. It's a Spanish cast. There are some really great special features on here. Never seen this movie before. Never heard of this director. But I did start watching. I finished this movie last night, and I started watching some of the special features, and it was really interesting. There's a lot of cool interviews with the cast, and they were talking about how huge this movie was in the box office of the time at the time. And Narciso Abanez Serrato was regarded in Spain at that time as kind of being like the Spanish Hitchcock. He made, I guess, a lot of other films that were suspense horror films. And again, the atmosphere for this movie is just unbelievable. Just so incredible. And, when I mention those other movies, in movies that are, I think, just classics. And I think it's really because of the limitations, being that they were essentially TV movies. It's it it really, I think the filmmakers are forced to really get really creative and build copious amounts of suspense and really spend the time to create that atmosphere and really do a great job on bringing the characters, to life and making them shine because of those limitations. And I feel like this movie has that. Like, the atmosphere is just incredible. And the interesting thing was, when I picked this up, I picked it up in passing. It was a really good price. It was like $10, and it looked really awesome at face value. And it, again, it came out in '69. at face value, it looks like it's a like a classic, kind of gothic ghost story. And when I watched it last night, I'm like, this isn't really a ghost story at all. It's very interesting. The premise of the movie is basically about this all girls private school and the headmistress who runs it, and she is this really extremely domineering woman who kind of puts all of these girls in this really repressive, kind of horrible environment. And the story is about them trying to deal with this situation, but also wanting to break out of it. And while this is all happening, and you're seeing all this great character development, there are these series of where these girls are kind of getting picked off by this killer, this unknown killer, one by one. And I kind of feel like this movie is actually more of a slasher movie, if anything, and really awesome. And but the ghost story scenario, like, and the whole story takes place in this giant house, this like mansion, this giant mansion, and the cinematography is just absolutely incredible. There's a lot of cool scenes where there's the use of shadows, which is just amazing. There's a lot of scenes where it's raining, and it does feel like you're watching like this classic ghost story, even though, like I said, it feels like it's more of a supernatural, or I should say, it feels more like a slasher movie. And the other thing that's really interesting, because of the rating of this film, because it was rated PG, there's all of these situations that happen to the girls, of where there's all this like implied, sexual repression. And I found this movie to be, even though they don't really go all the way or show you everything, it's incredibly sleazy. Um, and it's a cool balance of how they're able to just, and the suspense of this movie is incredible. It definitely has a Hitchcock vibe to it. But everything is implied. Like, it's not, there's barely any blood in it. There's not any real full on, say, frontal nudity or scenes of sexual intercourse, but everything is implied. And it's so effective. It's just the atmosphere is just so dense and thick. Really, really awesome. The musical score for this film is just actually just incredible. It almost acts like its own character in the movie. Just amazing. The interesting thing too is it also comes. There's two versions of this film. There is the Spanish uncut version, and then there's also the worldwide or U.S. theatrical version. And the Spanish version came out in '69, and then the U.S. version or the worldwide release came out in '71, a few years later. And I've talked about this before. Like, this is definitely it's a foreign movie, but so like a lot of the times when I buy movies and they're foreign films, I have a ton of foreign movies, and I find that like a lot of the times, if you have an option to watch, say, the American version or uh, the straight like kind of theatrical version, and then you have the option to watch the original language version with English um, dubbed dialogue. I always find, while I love as a fan, I love to have that option, but I always find 9 times out of 10 when I watch the original native language version, the story is way more cohesive. Uh, it's way easier to follow, and there's a lot of things that aren't cut out of the film. They tend to be a little bit more gory, but overall the story is way more cohesive. When I typically watch dubbed versions or the versions of where things are cut, a lot of things are not. I find it's a lot of times it's not, the story isn't as cohesive, And there's something cool and fun to watch. When you watch a lot of these exploitation movies, it can be a lot of fun to watch the dub versions because it's, adds an extra layer of campiness or ridiculousness to the film. And I do love that. But getting into the actual film experience, I find it's a superior way to kind of understand or comprehend the movie. Um, and also, I tend to, if I have an option when I'm watching a movie, to always watch, say, the director's cut. Two examples of that would be Ridley Scott's Alien, the first one, and James Cameron's Aliens, which are, just masterpieces. And, as a kid growing up watching those movies for years and years afterwards, I always saw the theatrical versions. And when I eventually bought these movies on Blu-ray, I saw that there is a theatrical, or there is a director's cut. And then another example would be there's also a director's cut for The Exorcist. And now when I watch those movies, I only watch the director's cuts because they're longer. There's more, there's all these great scenes that were left out of the original. The story is a little bit more cohesive. It's just a much more enjoyable experience. So I always go to that. So when I saw that there's there were two versions of this film, I right away went to check out the Spanish version. And the one thing that was a disappointment was there's no actual original language version. It's the Spanish version is still dubbed. Um, but when I started watching the Spanish version, the quality of the transfer was horrible, like really bad. It was almost like really bad VHS. So then I switched over to see what the theatrical version was like, and I watched that, and the quality is really, really good. So I was like, okay, I'll just watch the theatrical version, and I was blown away by it. This movie is just incredible. And the other thing that is so cool is the ending. The ending is just such an incredible payoff for this movie. And again, like I said, it has a PG rating, and this movie definitely has a very, all there's all these like sexually implied kind of situations that happen in the dynamics with these girls. And I came away from feeling that this movie is like, even though a lot of things are not shown, it's super sleazy, and so many things are left up to your imagination. And to me, that's the biggest component of these films that I love is the atmosphere. I attribute it to the atmosphere, the incredible, rich characterization of these actors that you're seeing on the big screen. Just awesome. An amazing discovery. Super suspenseful, super creepy. The suspense is really just amazing. Just amazing. And I kind of feel like it's an interesting combination of styles, like, or genres, where it's got that feel, like the setting feels like it is a real traditional, classic kind of gothic ghost story slash meets the classic slasher film. I mean, it's kind of a combination. It's not really a pure slasher film, and it's not really a pure ghost story film, but it's got all of those elements, and really, really awesome. Really impressed with this film. Never seen it before, so yeah, I highly recommend this movie. 1969, The House That Shrieked. This movie kind of rules. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.